When I first read the book, I thought it was going to give me a whole lot of tools into critical thinking and provide me with insights into how to be successful like David has done in his life and in his career. But in fact, this book is a lot more profound in its message. And instead of a set of tools, it's a journey. And it's a journey through one's own mind, trying to identify purpose and understand the world a little bit different.
It's certainly David's most ambitious book. And what it is you have to read it yourself to find that out. It's a memoir, it's a travelogue, it's a meditation on the meaning of life, it's an investigation into spirituality and religion. It's a very personal book, and I think how you read it, everyone's going to take something different out of it.
So the one thing I've learned the hard way about working with David is you never really know what to expect. And I think nothing epitomizes that more than orthogonal thinking. There's a saying that innovation and creativity is the art of taking the two furthest places in the brain and finding some meaning between them. And I think that's what David's really tried to do in this book, and perhaps it's more than 2 places, probably 10 places in the brain, that he's been able to bring those different thoughts together to create something that's really creative, something that's really innovative, and something that I think will make a long-lasting impact on anyone who reads it.
David's first 3 books were on banking, on economics, on finance, on geopolitics, basically in his work wheelhouse, I would say. And then he gave me a heads up that he was working on a memoir, and it was a little bit different, it was a little bit esoteric perhaps, and not quite what I had worked on before, but it was amazing. And from David sending through the raw manuscript to us editing it and having it ready for print was something like a month, maybe 6 weeks, which in publishing terms is incredible. It means that the final manuscript was in superb shape. It was intriguing, it was different.
I think the real strength and enjoyment of orthogonal thinking comes from the fact that it takes philosophies from so many different streams, things that you wouldn't think have commonalities, and brings them together into a really profound conclusion at the end.
This idea of believing in nothing has become almost acceptable in our times because there's been such an eradication of values and of true belief, and everything's about money and power. So what I want people to do, ideally, is to read the book and think slightly differently.
It is that kind of book, when you first read it, you're left almost scratching your head, like you just try to think about what does infinity mean. So maybe you can just take us right to the very back or the very beginning, and when this idea of using orthogonal thinking to convey the message in the book popped into your brain.
We live in a secular world, even though there are churches and synagogues and mosques, there's places of prayer and worship around us all the time. We manage to compartmentalize our existential question very easily. Like, no one really wants to talk about why we exist or what's the point of it all. I've tried to put my finger on what is the biggest question of them all, like where does language come from? I mean, if you look at Darwinism, if you look at evolution, it doesn't make sense that suddenly apes started speaking language with infinite meaning. And if you look at where that infinity sits, it sits in what Noam Chomsky calls universal grammar. And then I'm like, but this is the same thing that I've seen in maths. This problem of n+1, this problem of infinity. So I needed a tool with which to convey the existential crisis in my head, which I can't believe that people aren't walking around going, what the fuck? Like, how come, you know, but people aren't. They're not walking around like dumbfounded by reality. But it is astounding that we are here sitting on this stage, speaking with language.
When I first read the book, the difficulty for me was, where do you place it? Where do you put it in when you catalog it in exclusive books? Is it, you know?
So I've gone to each individual store in Joburg and told them, put it in the front.
As an editor, I always want to learn new things while I'm editing. and I want to have my thoughts provoked. And this book was, or this manuscript was exactly that. He's gone and found truths about the universe, and I think that different readers will find different truths about life, meaning of life, the way we live.
If you believe in universal grammar, then you can't be an atheist. I'm sorry.
It is a tacit admission in a higher power or divinity
Yeah,
in the formation of language, because you can't trace the root of
Yeah, someone's got to explain to me where language comes from, and then I'll...
I found that interesting, because your critique of Foucault is that life isn't absurd and meaningless. There is inherent beauty in mathematics, in language, but there are so many paradoxes in mathematics that are almost unsolvable, unknowable. Does that not point to a sort of meaningless that Foucault was alluding to?
Let's say we ask the question, do you believe in God? It's a stupid question, because everyone has a different understanding of what that means. Do you believe that we are the outcome of the Big Bang, and that's the explanation? Well, that's a very poor explanation as far as I'm concerned. Like, we have a whole lot of people who believe in string theory until they don't. I used to be an atheist. I now believe, not entirely, I think about it a lot, that things don't happen randomly, that things are put in my way to send me messages, or at least to get me thinking. Often I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do, but I definitely don't think that it's random. It can't be, because if it were random, just think about it, then what is the point? Why even bother? What is the magic that drives us? Is it just to ascend above other people? It makes no sense.
The writing in the book really is, for me, what can be a very dense. I mean, as you've listened, I mean, you're probably listening thinking, jeepers, do we want to read that? I mean, that's really, it's intellectually, it stretches you, it's rigorous, it's profound, but it's written with a lyricism. I mean, there's to that starry dynamo in the machinery of the night, when you're talking about that trip into you know, that Mayan discovery of enlightenment, and it's full of that, and that's what I really enjoyed about the book.
I think what has stood out for me most is the eagerness with which David wants to share the message and wants people to understand what he's saying. And he spoke about, you know, the writer's affirmation and ego, and, you know, always looking for positive affirmation. But I think what he's realized through this process is maybe an insight into his own beautiful mind, in that not everyone is going to understand it. You don't have to understand every single mathematical theory that he points to. You don't have to have a full appreciation of Ulysses and Dostoevsky in the same way that he clearly does, to be able to understand that there is an almost unexplainable beauty in both literature and maths. But that's, I think, part of the catharsis of being a writer.